I'm Dan, and I'm annoyed. I somehow managed to drop the arbor nut for my table saw, and it disappeared. Even though I've got a wooden bin underneath the table saw for catching sawdust, and I had a vacuum hooked up to it that was on, and I ran, and I have the dust collection bucket, and it was not in there, and it was not under the blade area. I took the table saw off its mountings, I tipped it upside down and shook it, and the nut is just gone. The fucking workshop goblins took it. Anyway, that's not at all what this video is about. I just needed to let you know that I was fucking annoyed, okay? So I want to make some more silicone molds for doing resin casting, for blanks, for like pens and such like that. And I have another video on this on my channel, but I thought, what the hell, let's do it again. So I was in the process of trying to cut my blanks for that. This is going to be like a pen blank, and this is going to be like a plate blank. And I hope I have enough silicone mold making stuff to do it, but I don't know. So we'll do the small one first and then see if we have enough left for the big one. Anyway, I thought I'd bring you along on this journey again with me. Because why the hell not? Nobody says I can't do a repeat story. A repeat story's not the right word there, is it? I don't know. A repeat subject. No one says I can't do a repeat subject. This is my fucking channel, and I'll do what I want, okay? So let's go. All right, here we have my two blanks that I want to make molds out of. This is just a chunk of 2x4. This is a set of plywood rounds. You can make these out of anything you want. You can use 2x4 or plywood or particle board or styrofoam or MDF or whatever you want, as long as it's solid and you can make it in the shape you want. So we're going to do this one first, and basically we're just going to build a little box around it out of foam core board, which is the cheapest, easiest thing to do. So let's do that. So basically we just have to build a little box around it. And I have some foam core board here. And you want to try and find a balance between making the walls of the mold thick enough that they'll hold their shape, but not making them so thick that you're wasting material in the process. And this actually looks like a good size right here. This doesn't have to be precise or anything. You don't actually have to measure this. I do want to cut it reasonably straight. There we go. And then you just build sides around it. And again, the sides just need to be high enough to cover this mold, to cover your blank here. But they don't have to be, well, so the mold we're making here is what's called a dump mold, which it's basically, we're going to create a mold on three sides of the blank. So this side of the blank is going to get hot glued onto here. And then we're going to fill the mold on top of that. So when we unmold it, we'll break this off, pull this out, and we'll have three sides of this, and we can just pour our resin into it. There's really no reason to make anything any more complicated than that for a project like this. That can go right about to here. Again, I'm not really measuring anything here. It's not necessary. I'm going to use my square to make the lines reasonably straight. Use a square, or I've got a yardstick I'll probably haul out at some point. And then you just hot glue the pieces together. Another hot glue stick to go on the back of this. And the key here also is just making sure that the you're getting a good seal along the seams, so whatever you're pouring in there for molding material doesn't go dripping out through the seams between the foam core. This really is not complicated at all. A hot glue only needs a few seconds to hold in place. And now we'll cut out the rest of the pieces. I mean, really need to use a straight edge. If you can cut a reasonably straight line, that's plenty. This is the kind of project where precision is not really required. And I kind of like that about it, to be quite honest. Whew. That is some hot glue. That is hotter than I expected it to be. Probably because that thing has been sitting on for a while. Probably turn the temperature on it down a little bit. I had this hot glue gun has a high-low setting on it. I'm actually going to set it to low. Let it cool off a little bit. You don't need a hot glue gun with a high-low setting. It's just what I happen to own. Honestly, like a $5 cheapo hot glue gun from Walmart or Target or wherever or Amazon or wherever you happen to be buying it, does just fine for this sort of work. You don't need anything super fancy at all. I think that the heat of the glue gun is actually making the glue take a little bit longer to set up than what I'm used to. That's all right. Mr. Rogers would say, it's all fine. Or Bob Ross, maybe. Are we doing Mr. Rogers or are we doing Bob Ross today? What do you think? There are no mistakes, only happy little accidents, right? If you want your happy little hot glue box to be a certain way, well, you can make it that way. It's your glue box, after all. It's your mold box, your foam core, it's your hot glue, it's your mold making. You can do it however you'd like. If you want, you can tape this stuff in place too, so you can work more quickly. For some reason, I'm feeling a little impatient with it. Maybe it's because I'm making a video. But once you put it in place, you can put a little bit of tape on there, hold it where you want it. Actually, you can put the tape in place first, and that kind of frees your hands up for the hot glue gun. Yeah. And just run a little bead of hot glue down there. Oops, glue sticks out. Get another one in there. And I may go back over all these seams on the inside and the outside just to make sure they are, I was going to say airtight, fluid tight, to make sure they're sealed properly. It has a tendency to get everywhere, that's for sure. I mean, is that a perfectly straight line? Probably not. Actually, that's not too bad. Again, perfection is not what is needed here. You can be slightly off and it will still work just fine. Just like that. I'll probably fast forward through most of this. Maybe I'll split the audio out, fast forward the video, and just clip in little bits where I'm chatting over the high speed. That's an option. All right, and that is our basic box. I'll let that glue cure for a little bit, but as you see, we'll just drop that in there, and then we'll start measuring our silicone. And I don't think I'm going to have enough with these little bottles to do my round that I wanted to do. So I'm probably going to have to get some more of that. But it's plenty to do this. And this will be a pen blank or shaving handle blank. Another thing you can do is you can nip these corners off on a saw, like a table saw, if you actually have the arbor nut for your table saw. And then you have an octagonal shape. But that adds some challenges to the mold making process. This is the simplest for the mold making process because you can just glue it in there and make a dump mold and you're done. If you have an octagon, you can't really do a dump mold with that. You'll have to do a two-part mold, or you'll have to actually mold it like this with this top off. And then you'll have to, you can make a dump mold that way. So you're dumping into the end here, but unmolding this shape in a mold that's this way is really tricky. You'd actually have to split down and peel it open to pull it out. In which case, when you want to cast something in the mold, you have to bring the edges together, and you probably have to have like a foam core box to build around it to keep the sides together while you're casting. Fortunately, since this is something we're turning, our casting process has a lot of wiggle room in it too. We don't have to cast really high precision because we're going to be taking a lot of this material off the final piece anyway. So it's not like we're casting a prop replica or something like that, where we need the mold to precisely match the shape of the object that we're casting. That's a whole different ball of wax, which I have done. Not for props. Have I done it for props? Maybe. Prop-ish type things. But I've definitely done it for model making. And we want the shape to really match the shape of the thing that you're casting, and there's no room for error there. You just have what you have, and you have to make a copy of it. And you don't get the nice wiggle room when you do with this because, like I said, this is for a turning blank, so we're going to be taking most of the material off of this, whatever we cast anyway, off of the final resin piece. And this glue just gets stringy and everywhere. And I'm being a little impatient. So we're going to let this sit for a moment and cure. What we're going to do, I'm going to throw some tape on there. Make sure them joints are tight. I'll let that dry, cool. I guess hot glue really doesn't cure, does it? It just dries, cools, until it's hardened back to its original state. And yes, I'm being very sloppy with this. Partly because I can. I mean, this is not a precision procedure. Like I said several times already. All right, let's glue the blank in there. So it's just gonna, as I hot glue this to my bench. Like I said, it's just gonna get glued in like that, and we'll pour silicone on top of it. And you certainly can do this with other shapes. Like I said, I'm going to do a round. This is going to be the same way, except I'm going to build a frame around it like this, hot glue this to the bottom of it, and then do a silicone dump on top. In fact, while this is cooling off, why don't I can at least make the mold for this. I Won't be able to, I don't think I'll actually be able to do the silicone part of the mold today. So I don't think I'll have enough silicone, but we'll see. So first things first, we want to draw the circumference on here. I'm just going to cut a chunk off the foam board here, just to make it a bit easier to work with. Okay. Let's do that. And then now, I could just make this a square. Hot glue this in here and just build a square box around it. That's the quickest, easiest way to make the mold. But as you can see, these corners are going to use a ton of the silicone rubber that you really don't need to use. So that's going to be wasting a lot of material that way. So let me see if I can actually draw a circle bigger than a circle, bigger than this circle. Not quite sure where center point is, but I don't have an extension bar for my compass. Oh, that's not too far off center there. It's a little bit off center. Go that way just a little bit. We can get this compass any wider. Okay. I think we can work with this. It's going to give me a mold wall thickness of about an inch, which I think should be plenty. There's a little bit of trial and error involved in this. Most of the time, there's a little bit of trial and error involved in this. I'm not entirely sure how thick this wall needs to be to retain its shape when I put the resin in it, but I think an inch will be fine. So we're going to cut this around. And once again, this part does not need to be a perfect circle. If you have a round cutting tool that will let you get a really precise circle, that's great. That'll be the base. Now this I made with my circle cutting jig on my bandsaw, even though these pieces weren't quite wide enough, so we've got a little bit of an inset there. These are still pretty close to being properly round. But this doesn't even need to be properly round. Honestly, you could make this as a square and just take the corners off on your bandsaw or whatever, or just turn the corners down after you cast your item. There is a lot of flexibility in this process. A lot of room for variation, a lot of margin for error, which is always good to have. Now that goes about that high. So once again, we're going to want to go roughly an inch above that. So we'll call that 3 inches. That's about 2 inches thick. That'll give me a base that's about an inch thick. Actually, let me go from this edge, because this is, no, it's not. I'll go from that edge. The base is about, so like I was saying, that'll give us a base that's about 2 inches thick, or 1 inch thick, which I think will be sufficient. Not 100% sure that it'll be sufficient, but I think it will be. Now this, I'm just going to make little bends in this like this. If you want, you can take your knife and score it all the way around and get a little bit smoother, but you really don't need to. See, we're just making little bends here. The stuff bends great. You'll create a fold right there. And then that will go right around that. Super easy. Super, super easy, this stuff. This is why I think this is a really handy skill to have if you're going to be doing, well, if you're at all going to be using resin castings, if you're going to do that with wood turning or with cutting boards or charcuterie boards or serving trays or anything else where you're going to be casting a big resin piece, having the skill to make your own, and I use the word skill very loosely here, as is evident by the fact that I can do it. This is not a high skill process. But having the knowledge of how to make your own molds is just super handy. And it's really not super expensive. I mean, the silicone itself is far and away the most expensive part of all of this. This stuff is what, like, I don't know, $4 at Walmart or whatever. Some cheap plywood that you don't even need to use. Like, seriously, you could cut a bunch of these rounds out of this foam core and stack them and use that for the center of your mold if you wanted to. Especially since this is a turning blank and we're going to be trimming everything up and taking the thickness down on the lathe. It doesn't matter at all if these edges are rough or anything else. The most important thing in all of this is making sure that your hot glue seal along the seams is tight. Yeah, I can. There's no way I'm going to have enough silicone to do this big one. I don't think even without doing the little one, I'd have enough to do this big one. So I have to order some more silicone to start casting to make this mold. And measure that around. Let's put a little bit of tape on here. And come on, blue tape is something you should just already have in your shop, right? If you don't, why not? Absolutely 100,000% should have blue tape. It's a much better option than regular old masking tape. And if you do it, oh, look at that. Look at that. That's beautiful. I got that lined up just right. I'm not going to say perfectly, but just right. But even if you did have a little bit of a gap there, small gaps can be filled in with hot glue. Large gaps, just cut yourself another chunk of foam core and fill it in. That's all there is to it, really. I don't know how much of this is going to stay in the video. Maybe I'll do a short form video and a long form video, huh? I'll do a short form where I speed up all the building parts. And then I'll do a long form where y'all can just hang out and watch me do it. Now we just hot glue all of this mess together. So I'm going to put on a nice thick bead of this stuff. It's sticks like crazy. Be careful because it is really hot. It is unlikely to cause any serious burns, but it will not feel good. It will absolutely burn you. Like, not enough to do any damage or anything, but all right. We are back around to the original seam, and now we want to come over to this other seam. Fill that in. I'm just going to goop some extra on here. Just to make sure we've got a nice tight seal. All right. And that's that one. That's that form done. Super easy. Super, super easy. Totally recommend you should try it yourself. All right. Let's pour this silicone, boys and girls, and everyone in between. You know, it just occurred to me that I have a problem because the mixing containers I use for mixing resin are made of silicone. And silicone rubber doesn't stick to anything except silicone. So I can't use these. So I guess I'm going to have to destroy a mixing cup from the kitchen. Well, I am truly, truly just having one of those mornings. I was checking the instructions for the silicone rubber mold making stuff, and it said to measure by weight, not by volume. So I figured I would borrow my wife's digital kitchen scale, which is plenty big enough to do what we need to do. And I, of course, dropped it on the shop floor, which, as you may or may not have noticed, is cement. So her beautiful little glass scale shattered into a million pieces. So not only did I lose my arbor nut, I broke my wife's scale, and I had to clean glass up off my shop floor. And I had to run out to Walmart to buy her another scale. And I also got a scale for myself while I was at it to have down here because I intend to do this more than just once. So anyway, there we are. I have a new scale, everybody. Yay! So let's see if we can get on with this video and finish making our things. All right, so like as I was going to say, I have this little tin measuring cup that should work for the silicone, but I also got some glass cups while I was at it. They'll probably end up breaking at some point. All right. All of these molding materials will be slightly different, so be sure to look at the instructions that come with yours. This says a mixing ratio of 1:1. That's pretty common for the hobbyist stuff. Curing time is 4 to 6 hours. Under laboratory conditions, the room temperature is 25 degrees Celsius, I'm assuming. Can be cured in 4 to 6 hours. Final curing time depends on thickness, room temperature, humidity, yada, yada, for all that other kind of stuff. It doesn't say what your work time is, but it says your cure time is 4 to 6 hours, so you probably have plenty of work time. Gloves are always good with this stuff, just to keep the crap off your hands. It doesn't need to be there. That's my own opinion. Especially with the resin. It's probably not as big of a deal with the silicone, but with the resin, yeah. You're going to want to do that. The other tricky part of this is figuring out how much you need to fill this space. I'm going to eyeball this one, but this is actually a pretty easy thing to figure out if you want to figure it out, because this is the box. So you can use the formula to determine the volume of this box. I think it's just height times width times length. I'll check myself on that, but I'm pretty sure what it is. And then you can get the dimensions of your blank in here, height times width times length. Subtract this from this, and that will tell you what volume the space is that you're filling. It's a lot harder when it comes to irregular shapes. Like this one, like that one, is pretty easy to do because you just need to figure the volume of a cylinder and the volume of another cylinder and subtract the one from the other, and that will give you how much volume you need. And normally I would measure these things by volume. But this says to measure them by weight. So I'm going to follow the directions and measure them by weight. But that adds a little bit of a challenge to this. Because weight and volume are two very different measurements. Measuring two very different things. And you'd actually have to figure out how much a certain volume of this stuff actually weighs. Another thing you can do is you can fill this with water or sand or sawdust, measure that volume, and that will tell you the volume you need for this. Anyway, let us get on with our little things here. I don't know what this is supposed to be for. I'm going to do 2 cups or close to 2 cups. I don't know if they're how different the volume will be, but yeah, this just says part A and part B. It doesn't say resin and hardener. When you're using resins, it'll actually tell you one part is the resin itself and the other part is a hardener for the resin. This doesn't say that sort of thing. Maybe we'll do 3/4 of a cup. Let's do 3/4 of a cup and 3. So that's 7.44 pounds. So I want to measure out 7.44 pounds of the other stuff. My guess is it'll be in the same range, the volume. But, you know, we shall see what we shall see. All right, we want 7.44. Very close to the same volume. Very close to the same. Now, the good thing about this is this silicone rubber will just peel off the inside of these glass cups when it's cured. Try and get all that out of there. See how long it says to mix it for. It just says fully stir. This also says it's bubble free, which this looks pretty good to be as far as being bubble free goes. Another piece of equipment that's handy to have for this sort of thing is a vacuum chamber, which I have a small one I was using for my model making and stuff. It's a little more important for the resin than for the silicone, I think. And another thing we can do is we can pour some of the mixed part back into this and use this to stir and scrape the sides to make sure that we're not leaving any unmixed silicone in here. Because we want whatever is left over in these cups, whatever residue, we want that to be fully cured so we can just peel it out. And if we leave some of the resin that's not fully mixed, it's not going to cure all the way. We're going to have kind of a goopy mess to clean out of there instead of just peeling a nice chunk of rubber out. And after I pour this, I'm just going to put it in my finishing area and go from there. I have to let it sit until probably, well, 4 to 6 hours. It's just about noon right now, so I might be able to unmold this tonight. We'll take a look. Now there's a big question. Did I mix enough of this stuff? Properly fill the mold? And the answer is not quite. As you can see, I'm sitting a little shy. So I think we're going to have to mix up the same amount again. You want to zero this out every time. So yeah, I'm going to use most of this stuff to make the mold for this. I'll have a little bit left over, but not much. All right, that's 7.22. Where the heck did I put that stick? I don't know. I'm miraculously good at misplacing things, I got to tell you. It's a talent. It's a real talent. Oh, it's in here. Wow. Just wow. All right. Okay, there we go. Now, what I will do at some point is I am going to figure the volume of this. Because if I figure the volume of that and the volume of the round one, that will give me some idea how much total of this stuff, volume-wise, that I need to buy. Because those are 19 ounces. So I'm going to need at least twice that much to pour that big round mold. At least twice that much. Possibly more. A lot of the resins will give you a mixing time. It'll say stir for 5 minutes or stir for 3 to 10 minutes or something like that. Won't say 3 to 10 minutes. Yeah, that's about what I want. Yeah. I always like to thump it a few times to get the bubbles to rise if there are any. Bubbles in this are not as important as bubbles in the resin, pretty obviously. And I could have made this, I could have made this box a lot narrower. Anyway, so that's it for building the mold frame and pouring the resin, pouring the silicone to make the mold. When we come back later in this video, I'm going to cut to next demolding this blank, and we'll probably pour a little resin because I have some resin to do some pouring. So we'll cast up a blank with this. Okay, it's around 5:30 now, the same day. This mold is feeling pretty solid to me, so we're going to try demolding it. Might need my hobby knife, but I don't know. Let's see what we got here. Yeah, it's coming apart nice and easy. It's the other beauty of using foam core like this poster board is it falls right apart. It's easy, easy, easy to take stuff out. And of course, our form is still glued to the bottom of it, so it's likely that's going to come off with the bottom piece. So we can just pry. There we go. Nice and easy. Look at that. Yeah, that's really good. It's nice and solid. Those walls are more than thick enough to handle what little bit of resin is going to go in there. And of course, we still have this that we can use for making another mold or turn this into something that we want. So that's it. That's how you make a mold for doing resin casting. Maybe I should show some resin casting too, huh? Let's see if we can get that in this video too. Yeah, those walls feel good. Let's cast some resin. This is. These are each 100 milliliters. This I can use my silicone mixing stuff for. This is not UV cured resin. This is just regular 2-part epoxy resin. It is not Total Boat or some other brand that you've seen online because it's some cheap shit I got off of Amazon for this. So I'm not sure like something like Total Boat is really necessary if you're doing a small pour like this. I think just anything will work. Actually, before I do the pour, I actually wanted to put some bits of wood in this. Got some of this lovely cedar. So that's actually going to change my volume quite a bit if I mix some wood in with the cedar. If I mix some wood in with the resin. I probably should just start staining this again. Let us get our chisel and chop this up into smaller chunks, eh? All right, the instructions are here. Mixing ratio is 1:1, as most of these hobby uses are. Mix equal volumes. Slowly stir the resin hardener for 3 to 5 minutes until it is uniform and transparent. Let the mixture sit for another 5 minutes, and then slowly pour. So our working time, if it's more than 3 ounces deep, you may need to apply 2 or more coats of resin, allowing 4 to 10 hours cure time between the coats. I don't know what 3 ounces deep is supposed to mean. That's not even a rational thing. But let's give it a try. So the first question is, how much do we actually need to mix up? I am going to go with 200 milliliters. I think that's actually more than what we need. Each of these cups is 100 milliliters, but I do have, if I have some extra, I have some molds over here that I can pour chess pieces with. So I've got something to funnel it into if that's more than I need, which I'm pretty sure it will be. But let's start with that. So we've got a 3 to 5 minute stir time, and then 5 minutes set before pouring. I actually save these little caps for these because I like to recap them when I'm done. Just to make sure there's a little extra layer of seal going on in the packaging. Now, since this has 1-to-1 ratio, it doesn't specify by volume or by weight. So I'm going to go by volume. I'm assuming if they don't specify, then they typically mean by volume. That's what I've always done. I just dropped that little cap there. All right. Let's pour this one, and hopefully this is actually appearing on camera. Whoops. Oh, that made a mess. That's a trick at trying to do something like this while you're recording it. It can mess up very easily. That's not quite 1-to-1, so let's put a drip more of the resin in the resin container. Like, seriously, I would be making much less of a mess if I wasn't trying to film this. But here we are. These are the kinds of sacrifices I make for my valued followers. All one of you. Wow, that was worthless. Stick is broken in the middle. Yeah, this is going to be more than what I need for this. Let's grab a piece of scrap stick over here to do our mixing with. All right, now we need to stir this for 3 to 5 minutes. I'll do it for 5 minutes. So cue the high-speed footage. All right, as you can see, a vacuum chamber really isn't anything more than a big cooking pot that you stick a vacuum pump onto, and you have a lid that can, a couple of valves on it and can handle the pressure. We'll put that on like that. There is, well, it's not facing you right now, but there is a pressure valve here. And we'll just switch this bad boy on. All right, now we'll just let that sit for 5 minutes. And we're going to very slowly pour our resin mixture in. Still see a lot of tiny bubbles in there. I'm hoping those will go away as it cures. Now this wood is pretty nicely wedged in here, but under most circumstances you'd have to put something weighted on top of this because wood is lighter than the resin and the wood's going to want to float. Just a couple of drops like this. Free up any bubbles, let them come up to the surface. Any big bubbles anyway. A little gap in here we could stuff some wood in. All right, you know, I was not as far off in my measurements as I thought I was going to be. With all of this wood in here. There's a bit left in there, as you can see. I am just going to throw some leftover wood in there and let that harden in that shape and see what that ends up looking like. And I think I may wait to actually finish this video until I have a chance to demold this and turn it. And I'll show you that turning on video. I think that's what I'm going to do. I have no idea what I'm going to do with this little bit of resin. Who knows? Yeah, see, these pieces do seem to want to be floating. So let's set this on top of here. And I can set that. I need something to weight that down. It really doesn't matter. Whatever I put in here, I can pull back out. But preferably, you want something heavy on this. Keep your wood from floating up. All right. And we're going to let this slag cure. And I will either see you in the next video or see you at the end of this one. All right, here we are. It's the next morning. This is the piece that I had in the bottom of this. It's mostly cured. Feels like it still has a little flex to it, so I'm gonna let it cure some more. Honestly, I'm gonna try unmolding this right now. It's probably a little premature, but it'll be fine. I just have to wait a few more days before I try turning it. Don't know if all the bubbles came out. We'll find out. Oh, this is all the stuff that I just threw in here. See, this is the beauty of silicone. Even though it's a little tough, nothing really sticks to it. And eventually you'll just be able to peel everything right out. See, all the stuff comes out, and we have that. So yeah, that feels hard enough to demold. So we just, I mean, this is really easy, especially with it being so small and regular in shape. You just peel the sides back and out it comes. And looks like there might be a few little bubbles in there.
find out when we turn it. I probably could improve my technique a bit as far as the mixing and stuff goes. But there it is. There is a turning blank. Oh, you'll see I got a little bit of a void right there. So that's the kind of thing I need to work on to get better. I mean, that'll end up turning away anyway because of where it is. But there it is. And I'll turn this in a separate video. I'm not going to make that part of this video. But when I do that turning, I will link to that video in the comments on this video. All right, well, 2x2 hands of purple, and I'll see you in the next video.